All right, party people, welcome back to the single nutrient series here on the IBS Freedom Podcast. Amy, we've wrapped up the water-soluble vitamins, the B's, the C's, and now we're moving on to fat-soluble.
Yes.
Fat-soluble vitamins, of which there are 4. And we're opening today with none other than vitamin A.
All right.
How do you feel about that? I just shared kind of off camera. I feel like vitamin A might be one of my faves because I think it's relatively underappreciated compared to, like vitamin D that everybody knows about now. So
Yeah.
how are you feeling? Are you jazzed?
Yeah, I'm always jazzed to talk about nutrients. But yeah, I agree. You have vitamin D as the favorite child, I feel like now, of the conventional world, even. Like, I feel like everybody's talking about vitamin D.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. I think vitamin A is one that I don't really see many people paying attention to. It's something I've run a little bit more frequently now for patients. So that's interesting, seeing some of the clinical data around vitamin A and like how much I'm seeing deficiency. I don't run it for every patient, but I've definitely had some patients where it's been outright low. I had a patient more recently, the last maybe month or so, who had low vitamin A, low zinc, both, and was having like pretty strong diarrhea. So we just more recently added in the A and the zinc. So I'll be curious if it helps with the diarrhea, because both low zinc and low A are linked to diarrhea.
Well, it might be a question too of which came first, the chicken or the egg, right?
Yeah.
Because if the diarrhea is associated with any degree of malabsorption or like fat maldigestion or, enzyme insufficiency or bile insufficiency, then those things could cause vitamin A deficiency. So it'll be really curious if correcting the deficiency changes the symptoms or if the deficiency isn't fully managed until you get that symptom under control. I could see it going both ways.
Yeah, for sure. Like, again, like if there's any bile acid malabsorption or something like that, too, or like in any issues with fat digestion and absorption, I think you could definitely see a vitamin A deficiency. But yeah, I'll be really curious because she doesn't have many other symptoms. She had, some other GI symptoms, but nothing crazy. So I'll be curious what happens. Well, I'll have to keep you guys posted, but
Yeah. And that, sorry if I interrupted you there, but I was going to just say, I think that a good place to start the episode is just pointing out that deficiency of vitamin A might be way more common than people realize.
yeah.
But there's also going to be a very strong asterisk that comes with this. So hang tight for 2 back-to-back statements. So I've referenced page 10 of the Nutrivore book a bajillion times on the series. I will continue to do so because there's this really handy dandy chart of nutrient insufficiencies and their prevalence in, I believe it's the United States, if I remember correctly, what this data came from. And at least as of 2011, and I'm going to wager a bet that our nutritional status has not improved much since then. As of 2011, according to this study that was cited in the Nutrivore book, 80.1% of Americans do not eat the average, like the requirement for vitamin A. 80%. That's pretty astonishing. Like that makes it into the top 5 as far as nutrient deficiencies go in this chart. So I do think that there is a significant risk for deficiency, A, just across the board, B, because we start getting into things like, people with tummy problems or fat malabsorption or fat maldigestion or leaky gut or low stomach acid could be at higher risk of vitamin A deficiency. So I think that the risk of deficiency might even be higher in the population that we serve. However, I'm going to start this episode by giving a actually a pretty strong safety warning and give you the shtick that we probably should do every episode, which is, I'm not your doctor. Amy's not your dietitian. If you're listening to this right now, for better or worse, we probably don't know you and we don't know your medical history and your lab results. So this information you're receiving right now cannot and should not be construed as medical advice. If you're going to try to get more vitamin A in your food or via supplementation, you've got to work with a healthcare professional, or at the bare minimum, do a little bit of blood work to monitor. Because while I think the risk of this is overblown, personally, from my experience, there is a very real risk of overdosing on vitamin A, getting too much, and it can lead to some pretty wonky symptoms and side effects that you really don't want to experience. So in order to keep you safe, I wanted to mention, yes, the risk of deficiency is real. Yes, I think you should probably pay attention to this vitamin. I hope we're going to make the argument for that in this episode. But you've got to be careful when you start mucking with the fat-soluble vitamins, particularly vitamin A. So with that safety disclaimer warning out of the way, do you think that it would make sense to talk about signs of deficiency, potentially? Could that be a good place to start us?
Well, I also think I want to talk a little bit about the difference between like beta-carotene and actual retinol. I think that is something that's worthwhile to talk a little bit about to start, just because I think everybody, or at least I used to think just before I went to school, that carrots have vitamin A in them. They help with your eyes. I feel like that's what my dad's like, oh, these are great for your eyes, vitamin A. Like even my dad knew that, and he's not super nutritionally savvy. Yes. Yeah. So everyone sort of thinks these orange foods are going to have vitamin A in them, and they have beta-carotene, which can be converted into vitamin A. But there's a large percentage of the population that struggles with that conversion. So I think it's something like half the population has a harder time converting beta-carotene into active vitamin A, which is retinol.
I think that metric might be in Caucasian people. I think
you might be right.
I think it's 40 or 50% of Caucasian people.
I think they did it in the UK, so that would make sense. It was like in some UK study. But
still.
Yeah. So 50% of us white people struggle with this conversion. I am one of these people. When I did my genetics, this is what like lit up like a Christmas tree on mine, like all the red. It was just in this particular in these SNPs that affect that conversion. And so that's something to think about. I know we've talked about how there's other potential nutrients where plant foods might not necessarily be like the most optimal. It doesn't mean that even if you have a problem with the conversion, maybe you're still getting some vitamin A. I'm probably still getting some vitamin A from the carrots I'm eating, but I would be someone that'd be very prone to deficiency if I wasn't getting any vitamin A from animal foods or, from a supplement or however I'm getting it. So I think that's something to keep in mind too, if you're heavily relying on vitamin A from plant foods. It might be something to look at on labs and just to explore a little bit of, maybe in combination with symptoms of deficiency.
Well, and I am glad you brought that up for a couple of reasons. One thing, for example, like we've talked about this on so many episodes already, and we will continue to do so as we roll into minerals soon. But when you look at the bioavailability and the absorbability of, minerals like zinc and iron, vitamins like some of the B vitamins, you're going to get better like absorbability and bioavailability typically from animal foods.
Yeah.
And you're going to get less from plant foods. And I say this as a longtime vegetarian. Well, I was a vegetarian for like 11 years. So I'm not anti-plant-based eating. Like I don't do it anymore. I'm not a vegetarian anymore, at least, but I still have a pretty plant-forward diet. But it's not that I'm against plant foods. Quite the contrary. It's just there's like well understood nutrition science, medical science facts about how we process these things and how we absorb these things. And you just have to kind of reconcile that if you're making that choice to eat a certain way and that is your preference, right?
Yeah.
And vitamin A is one of those. So as an example, one of the things I highlighted when I was reading my nutrition book to brush up for this episode was they made a point of saying that about 70 to 90% of dietary vitamin A, like real preformed animal-based vitamin A, is absorbed as long as the meal contains some fat. And by some, they actually quantify and say 10 grams of fat or more, which is not much. So as long as you have a little bit of fat in that meal, you're going to absorb 70 to 90% of your animal-based vitamin A. Versus they say that carotenoid absorption varies considerably depending on the food processing, but is typically less than half that of preformed vitamin A. Carotenoid absorption ranges from less than 5% for carotenoids in uncooked vegetables and non-heat processed vegetable juices, up to maybe 60% if present as a pure oil or like a supplement of beta-carotene.
Yeah.
And if you think about how a lot of people are consuming these things, we're eating raw carrots, raw bell peppers, we're going to the fancy schmancy juice shop, and we're getting, you know, a $18 juice or whatever. I mean, not me, like I'm too cheap to do that, but you know what I mean? Like a lot of people are doing juices and smoothies and raw carrots with hummus, and they're thinking, cool, I'm getting all of the vitamin A I need. And that probably isn't the case. You're probably absorbing very little of that. And I would share this. So we've mentioned before a little bit about your SNP and how if you eat a lot of beta-carotene rich foods like carrots, you'll actually get orange palms, right?
Yeah, it's actually kind of insane because I feel like it wasn't that I was eating so much. Like, I feel like someone that maybe didn't have the SNP, and I could be wrong, I was probably eating carrots maybe 4 to 5 times a week, but in like normal amounts.
Super normal sounding to me.
Orange hands everywhere, orange feet.
Admit it, you just do the rub-on cream tanner.
No, I swear, even my doctor, who's like the sweetest, kindest man, and he has a little bit of an accent. He would just be like, "Woo, your feet! You eat lots of carrot." Like he would, you know, just be like so flabbergasted by my feet and hands. That's how orange they were. They were like Oompa Loompa.
So Amy has funky feet. That's what we all need to know now.
So now I'm like looking to see if there's any tinge. But there is, and I haven't been slamming the carrots lately. But yeah, it's wild. I honestly think
slamming the carrots.
Yeah, I don't know as much data around it, but I do think when I had looked it up, because like there was a period where like this is kind of weird. I need to like explore this a little bit on the internet. And I looked it up, and they did say that you just basically store it in your fat. So you store it kind of in the fat of your hands,
the fat
your
pads.
Feet. Yeah, the fat pads.
Yeah.
So
well, and it makes me think, I'm going to date myself, but once upon a time, there was a show called House MD, and there was an episode of House where this guy came in and he was completely orange, head to toe.
Yeah.
And nobody could figure it out. It's funny because like, who wouldn't be able to figure this out? But none of the doctors like at the hospital could figure it out. And House walked in, told him, stop eating carrots or like stop drinking carrot juice. I think he was a carrot juice fanatic.
Yeah.
It's like, you're fine. Just stop with the carrot juice. And then he like walked away.
Yeah.
And it was this like, whoa, how do you figure that out kind of moment in the episode. But I will say, as a side note on this, I was going to try to pull up my 23andMe stuff for this episode, and I couldn't find it on my computer in time. I think if I remember correctly, I might have had 1 or 2 of these SNPs, and I think they were heterozygous. So mine wasn't as obvious as yours, you know, what you described. But I think I had a couple of them that were like so-so.
Yeah.
But I will say, I wonder if that is relevant for me because I actually pulled up my chronometer. So my chronometer data from the last year, I did all 12 months of the previous year. On average, I was getting 148% of my daily value of vitamin A, according to Chronometer. But as I shared with you, the big reveal of the episode, I did yearly once over type blood work on myself in the beginning of January, and my vitamin A was blatantly low.
Wow.
Like Quest flagged it, gave it the little L. It's in bold. It's in blue. Quest is like, hey, look at this. Now, it's not crazy. The range that Quest gives is 38 to 98, and I was at 34. So I was close to the bottom end of their range, but nonetheless, I was overtly low on vitamin A. And what's curious is I don't get the palm thing that you described.
Yeah.
And I had basically none of the symptoms of vitamin A deficiency as far as I could tell.
Right.
So I do think that there might be more subtle variations in vitamin A deficiency where, you know, maybe it's manifesting as a slight predilection to getting infections like easier than you think you should. Or maybe, maybe some minor kind of vision impairment, but for those of us who are super hella blind and wear glasses anyway, it's like, how do I tell if my eyes are worse?
Right.
But this is what I wanted to say toward the beginning of the episode too, is some of the symptoms of vitamin A deficiency, at least per this textbook, include, and I think this first one might be they are correlated thing.
Okay.
I don't think vitamin A deficiency would cause this. I'm going to state that first. So they list signs and symptoms of deficiency include anorexia, which I think that's a correlated thing, right? I can't imagine that vitamin A deficiency just blatantly causes anorexia without anything else involved.
So weirdly though, I feel like in nutrition, again, I'm kind of remembering from school, like anorexia might not necessarily be like the outright eating disorder. They might just be saying like, you're not eating very much, like kind of like.
Oh, okay. So maybe translation, like super low appetite, or just not eating, or like aversion to eating.
Yeah.
Oh.
So sometimes like nutrition textbooks will list it like that, but it's not necessarily like you're like going to the eating disorder clinic.
Well, anorexia nervosa is what I was thinking of, which I guess would be, okay. So see, look, we're like symbiotic here. You're bringing forth some knowledge that I might not have understood from a nutrition textbook.
So that's the confusion.
Okay. So then signs and symptoms of vitamin A deficiency can include anorexia, retarded growth, increased susceptibility to infections, obstruction and enlargement of hair follicles, keratinization of epithelial cells of the skin, and then they mention night blindness, which might be one of the first symptoms of vitamin A deficiency. And they mention dry eye as well, can be a symptom of vitamin A deficiency. But again, like what I was starting to say with my own stuff, I apparently was blatantly deficient in vitamin A on blood work recently. I drive at night fine. I don't seem to have any issues.
Watch when that vitamin A goes up, if like all of a sudden you do actually see so much better.
Maybe. I mean, I've been taking...
You're basically driving blind this whole time and didn't realize.
I don't think so. But
I know.
Maybe.
I'm just
maybe.
kidding.
I don't know, man. It's
we'll have
it's
to
perplexing.
See. This is just an experiment.
I was genuinely surprised to find this on blood work. Yeah. What I will say, however, that's interesting is, and I forget if I talked about this on the podcast yet. You know, last June, I had a brush with eye problems, and I was starting to get a bit of I had 2 retinal tears.
Oh, yeah.
And I had to go to the emergency room at a retinal specialist, and the retinal specialist had to do like a laser procedure on this eye. And he told me point blank that if I hadn't gotten it addressed right away, it would have led to a retinal detachment, which could have lost vision in that eye permanently. But also he was able to show me that I had a retinal detachment previously, and I had no idea.
Yeah.
It was just this weird artifact on the photos of the back of my eye, and nobody could figure out what it was. And he very matter-of-factly was like, oh, that's an old retinal detachment. You're lucky it just reattached on its own. But I started taking some carotenoids, not vitamin A for this purpose yet, but I started taking some carotenoid supplements because I started researching. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to be at higher risk for macular degeneration, cataracts, glaucoma, retinal detachments, all of these eye problems because of my extreme nearsightedness, I need to try to do what I can to prevent this. And one of the easiest things that I found that I could do was supplement with some extra carotenoids. I forget which ones they were because there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
It's not beta-carotene. I want to say it's like astaxanthin and I don't think lycopene. It was one of the other ones, but I got a supplement and I've been taking that ever since the eyeball excitement in this past June.
Well, hopefully that helps. I think one thing to note about deficiency is that, so many people are taking vitamin D. And vitamin D and vitamin A use the same receptors. So sometimes if you're taking a decent amount of D, it can, and if they're not balanced, so like even if your vitamin A is still in range, it can sometimes lead to a functional deficiency. So you might even develop some of these symptoms just from taking D. And I've actually seen a number of cases of vitamin D toxicity lately. I think because people are over supplementing D, because we're hearing all about the importance of vitamin D.
Well, it's like the damn folate MTHFR conversation back with the B vitamins, right? Like we've seen so many people who are taking 1 milligram, 5 milligram doses of freaking methylated folate, and we have to kind of bring them back with the voice of reason and be like, please don't do that.
Yeah.
No human needs to do that. And yeah, we're going to see this a lot when we get to the minerals, but if you superdose one thing, you tend to fuck with a bunch of their buddies. And that is something that comes through in the fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin D, vitamin K. They do interact with each other a fair bit. And if you superdose one, you're going to potentially throttle down or mess with the others.
Yeah.
And so this is a case for getting things from food as much as humanly possible and only using the high-dose supplements when you really, really need it. And being smart about the use of supplements when you do take them.
Yeah, for sure. I think, again, like vitamin D is one that you can fairly easily monitor, especially because most doctors are just running it now. So a lot of docs are running it in the annuals now for many patients.
Which is good.
Yeah, it is good. So it's like you can pretty much monitor your levels. Like if your levels are a little lower or like you're going into the winter and they're maybe like a little on the lower end of normal, maybe taking a little bit of vitamin D makes sense. But like when you start really shoving vitamin D to higher levels, it can certainly lead to weird vitamin A stuff. So yeah, just something to keep in mind.
And again, I'm going to draw a parallel. I'm not anti people taking a folate supplement or a B complex, especially if they are showing signs of deficiency, or if they have a really hard time getting something from their diet. Like if a vegan wants to take a B12 supplement, for example. But, with vitamin D as an example, it's the difference between, are you taking like 2 or 3 or 4,000 IUs a day and kind of leaving it there like through winter, which I think those doses are pretty well supported by research. Or are you taking 10,000 IUs every single day, even in the summer, because, your naturopath or whoever told you that you had to take that much and you're not monitoring enough, or you're not caring when your vitamin D is popping up over 100 and getting into that bad range. And that might be a good point for me to pause here and mention the dose. So vitamin A supplements, I think, are useful. I mentioned this earlier, but I personally do think that the risk of overdosing on vitamin A is overblown in, textbooks and nutrition classes. I know it's a thing. I know it can happen, but I still remember my nutrition class, or one of my nutrition classes from grad school. I remember one of the things that they told us was, don't ever eat polar bear liver, because polar bear liver has enough vitamin A in a single bite that it'll kill you dead.
Oh my God.
And it was like, when is this knowledge ever going to come in handy?
All right.
Just such a random
You weren't
factoid.
planning to go to like Antarctica and eat some polar bear anytime soon?
You know, I hate
I don't
being
even know
cold.
if that's where they come from. They might even be at the South Pole or something, or North Pole. But
Yeah,
I
I think polar bears are more North Pole.
Okay, you might be right.
Penguins are South Pole only. Fun fact.
Yeah. My parents were just in Antarctica like last year, so they saw 1 million penguins.
There you go.
Didn't
Well, yeah.
hear any polar bears, so
Yeah, that might be for a reason. Different poles. But anyway, we digress. So, you know, you get these bizarro warnings of that. And like, as I was flipping through the textbook, there's this big section on hypervitaminosis A and, oh my God, what can happen? And I will say, like, I think that it's useful to be aware that that's a thing. Symptoms that they rattle off include nausea, vomiting, double or blurred vision, increased intracranial pressure. To a normal human, that would manifest as a really severe, really weird headache, by the way. Headache, dizziness, skin desquamization, and muscle incoordination. I will say, when I've done higher dose vitamin A supplementation with people, first of all, I always base this on blood work. If somebody came back with low vitamin A on blood work and I wanted to get their levels up kind of quickly, either for like anti-inflammatory or, you know, immune regulatory kind of purposes, usually is what I would do that for. But if their blood levels are low enough that I feel comfortable dosing them high on vitamin A, I had this handout and I actually pulled up the PDF on here. And I have, you know, a bit about what does vitamin A do? Why are we doing it? The safety kind of considerations. And this was the list that I had provided on my handout, at least, was signs and symptoms of vitamin A overdose include the two big ones that I was taught are unusual severe headaches. Because again, that intracranial pressure thing. So worst headache of your life, super weird, bizarro headache, and bone pain. Those tend to be the two big ones. And then, you know, maybe nausea, vomiting, poor appetite, vision changes, sensitivity to light, that sort of stuff. But I will say I have probably done high dose vitamin A supplementation. I mean, when I was doing a lot more autoimmune inflammatory kind of work, I probably did this with like 50 to 100 people over the years. And knock on wood, I never once saw any sign of overdose. But again, like, these were people, I measured their blood work ahead of time, so I knew that they were low enough that I could get away with it. We did the high dosing for a week or two. We usually followed it up with another round of blood testing just to kind of check in. Then we would bring it back down quite a bit and get them to a maintenance level. But I gave people this handout and I walked them through, you know, the risks and why we're doing it and what to watch out for. I did this probably 50 or 100 times and I never saw a single person with any symptoms of true vitamin A hypervitaminosis. So I do think it might be a bit overblown, but it is a thing. So you need to be cautious when you do something like this. And again, like I was monitoring people. So that was
I
important.
feel like that's the general consensus too of like Chris Masterjohn. I sort of view him as like a fat-soluble, like in particular, he's a nutrition guy, but a lot of his research when he was in academia was all on fat-soluble nutrients. So he, like, to me, is an interesting follow specifically for vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin K, and vitamin E, I guess. But he kind of talks about DA and K a lot because I think that that's where a large swath of his research was focused on. But he says very similar stuff about vitamin A as well. I personally have not seen anyone have toxicity with it either at higher doses. I think that the one thing that could be important is maybe supporting D and K while you're doing A. That could be something to consider. I think it lowers the risk of toxicity if you're supporting the other fat solubles. So that would be like my only other add to what you're saying is maybe supporting D and K while you're doing A makes sense.
Well, I would even say E. This one surprised me because I think like A, D, K, those I had a little bit more familiarity of their interaction.
Right.
But E popped up in a couple of places when I was reading, but it was less so with real preformed vitamin A, and it was more so with the carotenoids and beta-carotene. So, for example, I'll just read 2 little snippets from my book here. So, for example, the presence of vitamin E within the enterocyte, so in the gut epithelial cells, is thought to protect beta-carotene from oxidation. However, if present in too high of a concentration, vitamin E might inhibit carotenoid absorption. So it's that sweet spot where, again, you want to have enough vitamin E. You don't want to be deficient, but you don't want to be doing super duper ultra mega doses of it either. It's a Goldilocks effect, as is the case with almost every vitamin or mineral. So that was one. The other one where vitamin E specifically came up was this bit that said, studies suggest that beta-carotene works synergistically with vitamin E, scavenging free radicals and inhibiting lipid peroxidation. And then they go on to say basically that like one works on like the inner surface of the cell membrane, and I think E works more so on the outer surface of the cell membrane. So there's little nuancey differences there. And excess dietary vitamin A intake interferes with vitamin K absorption, and high beta-carotene intake in turn may decrease plasma vitamin E concentration. So again, it's the sweet spot. You don't necessarily want to be blasting yourself with beta-carotene. What was the hashtag, like pounding the carrots, or I'll have to look back, whatever I said, whatever the hashtag was from earlier in the episode. You don't want to be pounding
carrot
the carrots.
Hands.
Yeah, you don't want carrot hands necessarily, because then you're going to be freaking with your vitamin E as well. But you want the sweet spot, the Goldilocks effect for all of these nutrients. While we're on the topic of nutrients playing nice together, do we want to talk about a couple of others? Because I have a couple other highlighted things to highlight.
Yeah, for sure. And I have one more other sign of deficiency that I was just going to say that I always noticed that keratinosis pilaris, or like KP, chicken skin on the arm, I guess it's like it can happen from dry skin, but that seems to be heavily linked to when my vitamin A levels are low. If I start to get KP and I take a little bit of vitamin A for like a month or two, I notice that gets better. I think there can be genetics at play in KP as well. I don't think it's always vitamin A deficiency, but that's something to keep in mind if you get like the little bumps kind of on your arms or legs. It's something to kind of keep in mind, or it might be worth exploring getting vitamin A tested.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's another good one. And I'm actually surprised it didn't pop up in this textbook when I was brushing up on this.
Yeah.
But we're bringing to the table more than the book alone could tell you.
Sorry. Yes.
Let's see. So another piece too is I was surprised that there's interplay between dietary protein intake and vitamin A. And one of the things that came up is that you need carrier proteins, and the carrier proteins are going to be made out of protein. So that's a piece that popped up. So for example, the book says, I'm just going to bring it closer to my face. Protein and zinc influence vitamin A status and transport. First, the activity of carotenoid dehydrogenase, which cleaves beta-carotene, is depressed by inadequate protein intake. Now, if you think about this, which group of people are going to be mostly or exclusively dependent on beta-carotene as a vitamin A source? Vegans and vegetarians.
Yep.
And what macronutrient are they probably undershooting the worst?
Protein.
So that's going to compound your problem if you're eating an exclusively or heavily plant-based diet, right? Second, overall vitamin A metabolism is closely related to protein and zinc status because the transport and use of the vitamin depend on two vitamin A binding proteins and because zinc is required for protein synthesis as well as for alcohol dehydrogenase activity, which converts retinol to retinal. And then there's some other interplay of like, I think actually retinol binding protein to make that. I think you also need zinc. And then zinc is important in a lot of the same tissues and regulatory functions. Like zinc is obviously very, very important for the immune system and its maturation and regulation, as is vitamin A. Zinc is super important for skin and epithelium, as is vitamin A. Zinc is important for eyeballs and like some of the functions in eyeballs. So I think that the two nutrients have significant overlap in like the functions and the areas of the body that they do their work. And that's probably not coincidental.
Yeah.
But again, if you think about it, what minerals are vegans and vegetarians most at risk of being deficient in?
Zinc.
Iron and zinc.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just, it's looking kind of grim for the plant-based eaters. The more we talk about this, you got to be careful, man. And again, I'm 11-year vegetarian. I don't say that lightly. This I also thought was interesting. This is the last one I think I'll share for right now, because now I feel like I'm just giving a TED Talk reading from my textbook like a dork. But they worded it well. Nerd. So iron metabolism is also interrelated with that of both carotenoids and vitamin A. I had forgotten about this. Iron is a cofactor for 15-15 monooxygenase, the enzyme responsible for the conversion of beta-carotene into retinol. Vitamin A, likely as retinoic acid, may also directly affect iron absorption, metabolism, and the storage or red blood cell differentiation. Vitamin A deficiency is associated with decreased incorporation of iron into red blood cells and diminished mobilization of iron from storage. And in another part of the book, they mentioned that iron deficiency anemia is common in people with vitamin A deficiency. And what's freaking interesting about that, my friend, is you and I have talked about it a little bit on this podcast, but particularly off air. I've been watching my iron for like 5 years at this point, and I've been curiously monitoring my CBC and my ferritin. And I've gone through phases where I care about it a lot and I'm trying to treat it. And then I go through phases where I'm like, fuck it, whatever, I feel fine, and I just leave it alone. But I've been actively monitoring or interested in that for myself for a few years now, because my ferritin is just a little bit lower than I would like it to be from a functional perspective. And my like CBC, like red blood cells, hemoglobin, et cetera, can dip just a little bit lower than I like, especially after I have my period. And so it makes me wonder, I'm like, oh, vitamin A came back blatantly deficient. Maybe that's part of it for me. Now, I will say though, if you hear hooves, look for horses first, not zebras, unless you live in Africa, obviously. But if you live in the United States and you hear hooves, look for freaking horses. Don't jump to zebras. I'm going to acknowledge right now, I also know for sure, based on chronometer tracking for years, I don't consume enough dietary iron. So I'm not hooking into my new vitamin A theory a ton, because I know that the lower hanging fruit and the much more obvious answer is simply that I don't eat enough iron and I need to remedy that. I'm pretty consistently hitting like 70 or 80% of my daily value for iron. And as somebody who is taller and larger than the average woman in the US, right? Like I'm 6 feet tall and 190
You're a big,
pounds.
beautiful woman.
That's right. Big, beautiful woman. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
But seriously, considering that the RDA is the same for all women of a certain age, and that means like theoretically I would need the same amount of iron as you. Yeah. And I tower over you like a skyscraper. Like that doesn't make sense. So I think I'm probably one of the people who needs to be pretty close to the recommended daily value for any given nutrient just because of my stature. Yeah. And so if I'm hitting 70 or 80% on my iron, I think there's a pretty high likelihood that that's not enough for me. Yeah. So I'm going to look at that more first. I actually had mussels as my lunch today. I do chickpea.
I thought you said mussels. I was like, wait, what? Mussels.
I mean, I do have mussels.
Yeah.
But No, like the bivalve, Amy.
Yes,
the
bivalve. I know. It was only a second before I realized.
Okay. Yeah, no, I had mussels and chickpea pasta for my lunch today, and I do that a couple times a week. So actively working on the iron piece of it, nutritionally speaking, trying to practice what I preach. But enough about me, enough of that. What else do we want to share with the people?
Well, I have some stuff in my book, a little more specific to like the IBS gut function for vitamin A. You know, I think the one of the biggest pieces is that vitamin A is so important for the mucosal barrier and like having a nice thick barrier. It looks like there's just some. I'm going to rattle off some of the major points from the research about vitamin A and gut function and that sort of thing. But it does, you know, the mucosal lining is so important for keeping the microbiome healthy. Replete vitamin A status is linked and associated with increased microbial diversity and reduced levels of pathogenic microbes. So if you have adequate vitamin A, you're going to have a healthier microbiome and less sketchy gut bugs. That could be from some other things too. Vitamin A does help control immune function in a variety of different ways. It seems to affect immune tolerance in the gut as well. So like people that might have a lot of sensitivities and like immune reactions to foods might want to explore vitamin A, especially if their diet's pretty limited and there's maybe some reason that vitamin A could be involved. You know, first and foremost, I think maybe working with someone to try to increase diversity makes sense. I don't think it's always a vitamin A issue, but if you really are someone that has a lot of like reactivity to foods and your diet's limited, could certainly be vitamin A could be a nutrient that you look out for, and that can help your immune system see what it should be fighting and what it shouldn't. So when we're talking about immune tolerance, that's kind of what I'm discussing, is like an immune system that might be trigger happy to things it shouldn't be, and then maybe letting things that you should be trigger happy for, or that you should actually. I hate this gun equation. Let me try to reestablish that. It's like always hard when you're talking about the immune system and then you use like a
shooting gun the bad guy as a metaphor.
I know. So, but like basically it allows your immune system to target the bad guys and leave the good guys alone.
Can I help you out?
Yes,
with
please
the
help
brain,
me out.
The brain that loves metaphors and analogies.
Yes.
We might have used this one at one point. It's like if you have a dog and the dog is barking its full head off and losing its shit over nothing. Like a 5-year-old just walked by on the other side of the street on the sidewalk,
right,
and it was fine. And your dog is like, like gonna kill the kid. Versus, you know, if an actual axe murderer walks into your house with an axe, you want the dog to wig out at that, right? So it's the dog has to learn what is tolerable and what is not tolerable, and like what's safe and what's not safe. Right. And that piece of the immune system is very heavily influenced by, famously, vitamin D. And I feel like that's where a lot of the vitamin D press has come into play in the last 20 years or so, is we finally have moved beyond vitamin D, rickets, bone, that sort of conversation. And we finally have been getting more press for vitamin D in the last 20 years on, hey, it helps regulate the immune system. It has an anti-inflammatory immune regulatory effect. And the thing is, vitamin A is very similar in that regard. It helps increase T regulatory cells. In animal studies called Th3 cells. It inhibits Th17 and STAT3 expression and calms down that really angry arm of the immune system that's just like attack, 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 attack. And so the net result is an immune system that is much more tolerant overall, but still smart enough to figure out what it should attack and what it shouldn't attack. Yeah,
for sure. No, I like that dog analogy. It's better than, man, I just hate gun analogies. They're kind of easy too, but you're like, it feels weird to do a gun analogy. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, another one that I hate is and I'm going to petition that we change the world with this, Amy.
Okay.
So
please.
The expression "you can kill two birds with one stone."
Oh yeah.
I hate that. Who's killing birds and throwing stones at birds? That's
Also,
terrible.
it feels like it'd be hard to kill a bird with a stone.
Yeah. There's like a practicality element to it
Right.
too. But we could say, what's the alternate that I've heard more recent years? Something stupid like you could feed two birds with one seed packet or something, or like there's the expression "there's more than one way to skin a cat."
Right.
Again, who comes up with this shit? This is like medieval, but I say now there's more than one way to pet a cat.
Yeah, I like that. I like it.
And that's a simple switcheroo.
Yes, I like that.
Yeah, we need to come up with some better expressions and metaphors.
But yeah, I feel like it's like you want your immune system to understand, okay, I'm eating yogurt. This is like a safe, nourishing food, and not start your immune system going, like the dog going nuts at this yogurt.
But if you drink creek water and give yourself a hellacious parasite,
right? You want vitamin A to be helping the immune system sort of attack that. Yes.
Yeah.
So that I think is a really big piece of it. There's been some decent research showing that vitamin A deficiency is associated with higher incidences of diarrhea. So like diarrhea tends to be more common when you're vitamin A deficient. Studies have shown, especially there's like a few children's studies showing that vitamin A supplementation reduces diarrhea. Which again, like we've talked about how vitamin A plays a big role in immune system, gut barrier support with the mucosal lining, that sort of thing. Going to be helpful for regulating diarrhea. It's also, which we've kind of talked a little bit about, important for regulating pathogens. There's data to support that vitamin A is really important for regulating and helping to produce antimicrobial peptides. So like your immune system's ability to kind of attack sketchy microbes or microbes that are inflammatory.
Natural local acting antibiotics. Basically.
Yeah. And I feel like we've always talked about too how, a lot of people will do round after round after round of herbal antimicrobial. And it just kind of makes you wonder, like, are they looking at their nutritional status and I think it goes beyond vitamin A. I think there's a lot of nutrients that probably play a role in regulation of microbes, but no one's really talking about that. Like, are you making sure your vitamin A is sufficient so that it can regulate microbes with your own immune system? Like, I just feel like there isn't really that philosophy very prominent out in the gut health space, where it's like your immune system can regulate these things on their own if you give them the tools to do so.
Well, and that's the goal, right? Is like we might need more acute treatment of something like an antimicrobial, maybe an antibiotic, even like herbs and probiotics and whatnot. But if you dial in your nutrition to a point where you're getting most of the things you need from food on a pretty regular like most of the daily basis, you shouldn't need a lot of other, supports and crutches and treatments and stuff. And, I do see this pattern sometimes of people who they'll be on round after round after round of antimicrobials. And it's like they feel good when they're on the antimicrobials, but then they feel terrible when they come off. And it becomes this like cyclical band-aidy, crutchy kind of thing. And it does make you wonder how many of those people are blatantly deficient in something like vitamin D or vitamin A.
Yeah.
And they have piss poor mucosal immunity and immune regulatory capacity. And then like the candida or the bacteria or the whatever is just getting out of hand. And they can't put the kibosh on that and control their own microbes. So, yeah. Yeah.
I feel like that would be kind of a fun episode to do, like what nutrients help that control your microbes or something.
Yeah.
Because there's
I feel like in a way you could make an argument for most of the nutrients though.
Right. True. That might be just the end of the... We're just going to tell you all of them are important. Another interesting point is that there's been some research that even mild vitamin A deficiencies seem to are associated with more severe GI infections. So like neurovirus, certain like nasty E. coli type bugs, because vitamin A is so important for mounting the immune response, but it's also really important for repairing the damage, like the post-infectious damage from an infection. It always makes me wonder, and I don't think there's any studies to totally conclude this, but so many of our patients have post-infectious issues. Like that does happen where it's not every one of our patients by any means, but there's a subset of patients where they've had a GI infection and then they kind of weren't the same after. And that was a major trigger for them. It does make you wonder, like, could some of these underlying deficiencies like low vitamin A be really impacting their ability to recover from an infection like that? It kind of took their immune system over the edge and they haven't really been able to reel it back in. It's just something to think about, with some of these cases where they have had a post-infectious incident.
Yeah, well, and you bring up a good point. And I have a YouTube video on this topic. I don't remember the title of it now because it was a couple years back, but there's this kind of unspoken conversation with post-infectious IBS type stuff. And that is, there are lots of people in the world who have gotten food poisoning or an infection or Giardia or whatever, and it totally sucks when they have the thing.
Yeah.
But then they bounce back and then they're fine and they move on with their life. Like you and your husband got food poisoning, what was it, last year? Or maybe year prior when you were going on a ski trip, right?
We had a couple incidents. We had a ski trip incident when Cece was like 8 months. So like that was about 3 years ago. And then we had one last year that was a total doozy.
I just remember you texting me and saying like that Cece was kind of on her own in the hotel room and she was just raising herself.
Yeah, that was when she was
around.
8 months when we were on the ski trip.
Yep.
But
I believe that was a Buffalo Wild Wings, if I'm remembering correctly.
That was we like stopped and I think we had joked like we're gonna get sick from this food because it was gross. I think I got like a salad or something. We both got sick, so I wonder if it was more of like a food prep issue. Do you know what I mean? Like using
like raw chicken.
Right. Something like that. I don't know. But it was it was a total doozy. But then we had a real doozy last winter too. I just remember like cracking up with Armand because we were both like thinking this very morbid thing. Like when the illness was like upon us, just kind of laying there being like, it'd probably be okay if we just died. This is miserable. Like it's that bad where you're like, I'm by no means suicidal in any capacity.
I'm kind of ready to go in this moment.
But in this moment, like if it just happened to like sweep me into death, I think I'd be okay in this very moment. But Armand, I like came out of the bathroom and told Armand that and he was like, oh my God, I was thinking the same thing. So it was just so bad.
Oh, yeah. Well, to that point, there are plenty of people, including
like death,
you guys,
like me,
who get food poisoning really badly.
Yeah.
But then they bounce back and they're fine afterwards. But there are people who get food poisoning, sometimes mildly, sometimes severely, and it totally wrecks them and sets them on this path for IBS, SIBO kind of stuff. And it does make you wonder, are there nutrient deficiencies as part of that? Were they... My theory, going back to that YouTube video where I talked about this, is if going into the food poisoning event, you have better resiliency, better nutritional status, and better overall like immune function and lower inflammation levels, I think that would bode well for you in regards to bouncing back quickly. But if your resiliency sucks, if there's something like crazy high stress or really shitty sleep or whatever, if you have nutrient deficiencies, if you already were inflamed to begin with, right? You've got like a bunch of autoimmune stuff or cardiovascular disease or insulin resistance.
Postpartum. I feel like both my periods were like peak postpartum when I'm breastfeeding and getting shit sleep. Yeah.
And I think that a lot of these factors kind of go into that equation of who bounces back and who doesn't.
Yeah.
Or who takes a hell of a lot longer and a lot more effort to bounce back. But yeah, I think that's a valid point, especially for the crowd that we tend to work with, for that matter. I think, I don't know if you had more to share from.
Nope, that's pretty much the main thing. Again, like it's just going to be important in balancing immune function, regulating inflammation,
And therefore the
supporting the
microbiome.
microbiome. Yeah, I think it's going to affect a lot of different aspects of the gut-brain connection and kind of stabilizing that. But like you said, again, we could do a episode on nutrients that are going to be important for regulating the microbiome, but it's pretty much all of them.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should just for funsies, and then we could go through, the episode could be really short, and we could just be like, all of them, see ya, and then log off.
Yeah.
Or we could take the time to go through some examples and mechanisms of like why each of them is important for that purpose. So I think it could still be a worthwhile episode. We would have fun making it at the bare minimum. But I had two other things specific to gut function that I wanted to point out with vitamin A. And then I wanted to circle back to who would be the most at risk of deficiency potentially, which kind of segues into that. So the book, again, this nutrition book that I always seem to have out for these episodes, they have a section on the digestion and absorption of vitamin A. And one of the things that they bring up is that, retinol, for example, is typically bound to fatty acid esters, and the most common of which is retinol palmitate. Retinol esters and carotenoids in foods are often complexed with protein from which they must be released. And they make a point of saying that carotenoids and retinol esters are initially hydrolyzed from protein by pepsin in the stomach. So we could start getting into people with stomach acid deficiency, low stomach acid kind of stuff could probably be at heightened risk. So certainly people who are taking PPIs, especially if it's at a higher dose or for a longer period of time, but maybe other varying shades of hypochlorhydria could fall into this as well. Certainly, more progressed cases of, autoimmune gastritis, pernicious anemia kind of stuff, that wouldn't surprise me at all, because again, they can get pretty hypochlorhydric as well. But you need that stomach acid to activate pepsin and break down the proteins and like get that initial breakdown of vitamin A from the protein that it's bound to. Then they go on and say, that because they're fat soluble, they're going to kind of coagulate and clump together. And then the fat globules containing the vitamin are emptied into the duodenum, where bile is required to emulsify them. So now we start thinking about people with poor bile flow, people who maybe had their gallbladder taken out, right? Then further down the line, pancreatic lipase and pancreatic cholesterol ester hydrolase secreted into the lumen of the small intestine facilitate lipid and vitamin A digestion. So we start making an argument for pancreatic enzyme kind of stuff. And then enzymes such as retinol ester hydrolase function on the intestinal brush border to digest the vitamin. So we have all of the levels of digestive function that we've talked about so much. You need stomach acid. Well, first of all, you need to eat the damn stuff. That's number one. You need to eat the damn stuff first, preferably the forms that are easier to absorb and assimilate. But then you need some stomach acid. You need some bile flow. You need some pancreatic enzymes. You need brush border enzymes, which are going to be affected if you have a leaky or inflamed gut. So it's really all of the different levels of digestion that become important for vitamin A, not surprisingly. But here's one more thing, another bee to put in your bonnet, dear Amy, and that is, you kind of alluded to this, but vitamin A as retinoic acid is needed by many cells for differentiation, the process by which an immature cell is transformed into a specific type of mature cell. Epithelial cells found as part of our skin and all of our internal body tracts, such as the respiratory, gastrointestinal, and urogenital tracts, are one example of cells that rely on vitamin A. So, we start thinking about you slough off so many skin cells each and every day, and you're turning over a new epithelial barrier every, 3 to 4 days inside the GI tract? These cells, where are they? Right there. these cells that I painted on my wall, these little enterocytes and colonocytes in the GI tract, you're turning over a new crop of those every 3 or 4 days because they're sloughing off just like skin cells.
Yeah.
If you don't have enough vitamin A to help with that differentiation, you might have impaired gut lining healing. And that's one of the things that could keep you stuck in sort of like a leaky gut situation.
Yeah.
So I think that, from the digestive sufficiency standpoint, from the leaky gut standpoint, from the critter dysbiosis infectious management standpoint, from the inflammatory immune regulation kind of standpoint, there are so many reasons why the people we work with and the people listening to our podcast right now should care about vitamin A, and it just doesn't get the attention that it deserves, in my humble opinion. So, realizing that we've been talking about this nutrient for an hour, we need to wrap up at some point. I still have a surprise that I want to wrap with, but I'm going to kick it to the dietitian in the house. I have my backup information if I need it. Do we want to at least briefly mention for the good people at home where they can get preformed vitamin A in food and where they could get beta-carotene in food? Should we make mention of that at the last possible minute here?
Yeah. I mean, I think that things like eggs, dairy, liver is going to be like probably the best source. And you wouldn't even have to eat
polar bear liver though.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to eat that much, maybe like 2 to 3 ounces per week. Would be a really solid form of vitamin A. So I think, again, some of these animal foods are going to have some vitamin A in them. I think some milks and stuff have preformed vitamin A added to them.
Like fish, fish to some degree, and like fish oil or maybe not fish oil supplements.
Cod liver oil.
Thank you. Yes, cod liver oil could be good.
Cod liver oil is going to have some. And then again, all the orange foods are the beta-carotene rich foods. So like sweet potato, carrot,
butternut squash, pumpkin.
Yeah.
Bell peppers, maybe?
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I think they do.
I'm glancing. Hold on. Let's see. In general, yellow, orange, and red brightly colored fruits and vegetables such as carrots, watermelon, papaya, tomatoes, tomato products, squash, pink grapefruits, and pumpkin provide a significant amount of carotenoids. Oh, and then they actually make a point, I forgot to mention, that green vegetables also contain some carotenoids, but the pigment is masked by the green chlorophyll. So you also get a pretty fair amount from broccoli, cantaloupe, squash, peas, and spinach. And then, let's see. So they mentioned orange peppers, but that might be one of the carotenoids that doesn't have
beta-carotene,
retinol capacity. Yeah. They talked about this briefly. There are 6,000 carotenoids, but only 60 of them have any vitamin A activity in the body. And they have varying strength of their vitamin A activity or equivalency. So I think that the one that they mentioned here for orange peppers might be one of the less active vitamin A equivalents. But anyway, I'm glad that we mentioned that. Now, can I mention my grand finale, the thing I've been waiting for?
Yes, please.
Okay. So, I learned very early on in my business, I hope I don't insult people when I tell the story. I learned very early on in my business that I am a primo target for multi-level marketing companies.
Okay.
Especially when I had a brick and mortar office and I carried a supplement inventory in my office. And so really early on, when I was first starting to practice, I would go to business networking groups and I would, you go around the table, you stand up and give your 1-minute commercial, your shtick, and then you sit down and you listen to everybody else's and you mingle afterwards and exchange business cards. And I did quite a lot of those, my first 1 or 2 years in practice. Mm-hmm. And then when we moved here to North Carolina and I was kind of starting all over again, I did a little bit more of that because I was getting to know the area and I wanted to get to know people and promote my new brick and mortar office. So when I tell you that I've been pitched on every multi-level marketing company on planet Earth, I'm not joking. I think I have been. They all flock to me. They get so excited to meet somebody like me because if you think about it, and some of them have okay products, it's not even anything like that. But like if you're selling like a protein shake or a pink drink or a essential oil line or whatever, if you could get in with somebody who has a brick and mortar office and potentially can peddle a lot of your shit, you've got it made in the shade, right? So they see $sign on my forehead and they flock to me. One of many companies that has pitched me over the years, and this was probably like 10 or 12 years ago. So I don't even know if it's still around. I'm pretty sure this was an MLM, if I remember correctly. There was the Pharmanax biophotonic scanner. And the whole shtick, so it's like you put your hand on the sensor and it, beep, boop, 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 and it gives you this number. And they give it to you like on a card even so that you can keep track of your number and be proud of it. And they were kind of doing this pitch and they're like, yeah, it's really great because you can monitor people's antioxidant status right there in the office, and it's quick and easy and not invasive. And it, and like most people are really bad, like in the red, and that's very motivational for people to like buy your supplements and do your things. If you can show them, oh, wow, you really suck at this measurement, and then you give them a supplement and then 2 weeks later, the measurement is better, they're like hooked for life, man. They'll buy your shit forever. And, they're doing this sales pitch on me and I'm like, all right, neat. And so, they're like, do you want to get scanned? And I do it. And I was really good. And they were like, wow, you must be crazy healthy. That's amazing. And I was like, oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I'm thinking like, I'd better be, I do this for work. But what I ended up kind of figuring out, I forget if they disclosed this at the time or if I researched it afterwards. All it does is measuring carotenoids in your skin, in the palm of your hand.
Yeah.
That's all it is. So like, can you claim?
I probably would have the best because all my
you'd be like,
they wouldn't even register me.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even
You'd
register.
be the best for sure.
Yes.
But it was funny because like their whole shtick was this could be a measurement for overall health.
Right.
This could be a measurement for overall antioxidant status. And like, isn't this the greatest thing ever? And I was like, it would be interesting to think through this critically because maybe you could make the argument that people with naturally higher carotenoid levels in the skin, like, for me, for example, I wasn't taking a carotenoid supplement at the time. And I generally do eat a pretty healthy diet and it's pretty varied. And I get numerous fruits and vegetables that have beta-carotene in my diet and carotenoids. And so looking at somebody like me, for example, you probably could use that as a proxy measurement for overall health of the diet or overall antioxidant status. But then like, is the answer to just cheat the system and take a carotenoid supplement, which is basically what they were selling and they wanted you to get people on? Like, I don't know, because as we talked about, if you take a crap ton of beta-carotene, you're potentially going to mess with your vitamin E status. And vitamin E is probably a more important antioxidant than beta-carotene even is.
Right.
So it's like, I don't think that's the answer. I didn't agree with their overall framework. And I don't really agree with the idea that you could always use this measurement as a proxy for health or a healthy diet. And I certainly don't agree with them that the answer is to like get people on a beta-carotene supplement just to improve their number for the sake of improving their number. But yes, that was one of the I'm pretty sure multi-level marketing companies that pitched to me over the years. And I remember thinking it was curious that they're making all these bold health claims from just measuring carotenoids in the skin.
Yes.
And that was even before I knew about the SNP thing. And like, maybe you're just measuring BCMO1 SNP status for all you know. I don't know. But I thought that was kind of funny to reminisce about that.
It is funny.
I do not endorse this product. But I did a quick Google search to pull it up again because I didn't remember the name of it. But yes, the biophotonic scanner. That's
Beautiful.
Several pitches I got.
Beautiful scanner, not overwhelmingly helpful.
Yeah, again, it depends. Like, if you took this device out into the real world and you measured people at like the gas station or an Applebee's or the state fair or, you know, Walmart or something, and you got a sample of the general population, it could be helpful in that case. If that teaches people that they need to eat more vegetables, then that could actually be a good thing. But I don't think it's going to be useful across the board. And I think that there's probably better ways to get this information. For example, Chronometer, super cheap.
Yeah.
And you probably don't need a scanner like that. So
True.
That's my ending shtick. But I wanted to share that little short story. What do you think, Amy? Should we tackle vitamin E or vitamin K next in the series?
I don't know. Let's leave it up to mystery until.
Okay, I thought you were going to say leave it up to the viewership, and I was like, well, no, because
No, we'll leave them
recording
hanging,
dates and stuff.
basically.
Okay, all right, then it will be a mystery for all parties involved until next time. We also have a guest or two coming up in the next handful of episodes, so that'll be super fun. Until then, guys, we'll see you next time on the IBS Freedom Podcast. So take care of yourself, go eat a little bit of vitamin A, real vitamin A, and we'll catch you next time with another rad episode.